Hello and welcome. I'm Anna, and this is a new episode of Proyecto Co, a channel that explores ideas, methods, and mental models that will help you expand your knowledge around social innovation, develop your potential, and master the best of what experts and entrepreneurs have already learned.
Privilege, power, and systemic oppression. We have invented a system that favors a privileged minority and ignores the needs of over 90% of the population. Aurélie Salvaire, diversity and inclusion specialist, explains these concepts and encourages us to organize ourselves, raise our voices, and invent a new world. A world in which all walls have a place.
Aurélie, it's a pleasure to have you here on Proyecto Co. And I'm really happy to get to know your opinion on systemic oppression. What is systemic oppression?
Systemic oppression is the mistreatment of a certain category of people in a group based on stereotypes, based on bias that we can have, and that is completely enforced by the system itself, right? So it's not something that happens only at individual level, but it's something where all the institutions, everything that is around us is actually contributing to this same oppression.
Okay. And could you give us some examples of systemic oppression?
So, for example, we're talking about, so systemic oppression first is at the service of a group that has the power, okay? So you have one group of people that have seized power by whatever way, either the force or anyway. And the idea is that they maintain it through different ways, right? So, for example, at the moment, in many of the European countries, if we take the European countries, the white, male, straight, body-abled, cisgender, middle-aged men.
What is cisgender?
Cisgender is basically the people who identify with the sex they have been given at birth. So, for example, if you're born with a penis and you identify as a male, you're cisgender. If you're born with a vagina and you identify as a female, you're cisgender. But in the case that you don't identify with the sex that has been given to you at birth, you're transgender.
Okay.
Would you do any transition through medicine or surgery or not? Still, this idea is that you're transgender. So basically, the idea is that one group, and this group is not uniform. That's what we have to understand, and that's where intersectionality comes in, and that's a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw like 30 years ago, and this idea that oppressions adds, right? So this is a critique, for example, to white feminism, the fact that white feminists are accused of defending only the rights and the privileges of the white females, right? But not care so much about the poorer Black or Latinos women. So the idea of intersectionality is that your oppression adds up. So if you're a female, it's one thing, but if you're a Black female, it's even more complicated. And if you're a Black female who is suffering from PTSD or from a mental illness, for example, it's even more difficult, etc., right? And so far, these types of oppression were completely separated in different struggles, and it was not taken into account that actually they can add up and have a heavier impact on the individual.
Because you talk about power. How do you define power?
So power is often seen as something quite negative, right? Because we currently live in a system which is a capitalist, patriarchal system, where, as I was saying before, only a few hold the power. And it's very hierarchical. It's a pyramid where a few have all the privileges, let's say, and the majority is working for them. So the idea is that we imagine power in the frame of the system. We imagine that power is authoritative, it's top-down, it's power over, it's, this idea of imposition, authority, and people kind of reject it. And especially people from oppressed collectives, they're like, I don't know if I want power, because they don't want to convert themselves in the oppressor, basically.
Okay.
But power in itself, it comes from podere, from the Latin, it means to be able to. So it's just an ability, right? It's just the idea that you have the possibilities to do whatever it is that you want to do. So in itself, power it's like money. It's nor good nor bad, right? It depends what you do with it. And so power in itself is important, and there's also a famous saying that power is never given, it is taken. So the idea that sometimes as minorities we tend to wait for equity to come, right? Okay. We're like, if I work well, if I'm patient enough, things will come. But actually that's not in the interest of anybody, right? To give you more power. So if you don't fight for it, and we can fight in a violent way, in a non-violent way, but if you're not active in pursuing more power, it will not come. Now, it can be a different types of power. It can be a power that is called power with, so it's more a collaborative power, a power that is more horizontal than vertical, a power that is, considering all human beings and nature as part of our ecosystem. And this is actually what is called ecofeminism, right? Which is linking the current oppression of nature with the oppression of women, people of color, children, animals. The idea is that it's the same dynamic at the end of the day. It's not only about women, it's about anybody that is oppressed by the dominant. And the idea of ecofeminism is that we get back a better and more balanced relationship with people around us and with the nature we live in.
Okay, so this kind of more inclusive execution of power, how do we implement it? Because the idea is clear, but the practice seems like more difficult.
I mean, for me, it's New Zealand, for example.
Okay.
Right? We saw just recently that Jacinda Ardern just won her second term again. For me, it's this idea of a power that is empathetic. So we have seen the way she reacted to the attacks on the Muslim community in Christchurch, for example, and being veiled to show her respect to the community and be very, very inclusive in her words. The way she dealt with COVID, and she was very strict and also very close to the population, answering their questions and their doubts all along the crisis. It's also her care for the environment, and a country that is really forward in the way they've been dealing with their energy and their environment, the way they respect the native people of their lands, and the excuses that have been given to them. So it's a lot of things, right? Small, concrete things. But I think it's not a utopia. We can already see it happening in some countries, in some cities. And for me, a city like Barcelona, honestly, in the last years, led by Ada Colau, is striving to go towards this kind of management and leadership. A country like Sweden has, for example, a feminist international policy. So you go to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and if you want to download their policy, it says in the first page, feminist foreign policy. So it's not just a concept that is about abortion or pay gap. It's actually way more encompassing than this. It's It's the whole way you see life, basically.
And would you say that people that come from minorities or are part of minorities are the ones who are empowering themselves in order to generate these new kinds of leadership? Or do we also see people who are born with privilege, with the highest privilege, that do implement this kind of leadership?
Both. I mean, I think it's really in both, because honestly, I think that all of us, we've both been the oppressor and the oppressed at one time of our life, right? So me as a woman, I can have felt oppressed in, for example, my patriarchal family, or in the professional world by some jokes, by some remarks, by the fact that some people might not hire me because I'm too strong-headed, or etc., etc. Now, as a white, well-educated, middle-class woman, I've often been the oppressor and being very entitled and being very demanding, and sometimes treating people of lower class less well, or being very authoritative with them, etc. So I think that honestly we all have a work to do, and I think nobody is perfect, and nobody is the perfect feminist or the perfect collaborative person, etc. Honestly, to uproot the way we've been educated in a very elitist and top-down military way, it's not like this. No, it's not in like 10 minutes or 1 hour or even 10 years. It's big work to unlearn this. And sometimes, I mean, we can't be perfect in everything. But I do believe that the work is on both sides. Yes, the oppressed collectives have to work on themselves at different level. So first, uniting, because one of the work of the system is to divide people, to rule. So women have been, for example, isolated in their respective houses for a long time, right? Or pitting people one against the other, like the Shias against the Sunnis, or, So the idea is uniting is one of the first things, creating collective, creating organizations where you're together, you support each other, etc. Two is, gaining as much support and self-care as you can as a minority, because, I mean, this system is very violent, and at the end, this is eating you, literally. The idea is that the microaggressions, the words, the language, the fact that you lose a job because of your name, the comments, the exclusion from your family, all this is adding up. And if you don't take care of yourself, it can be with a therapist, with a coach, with just having a strong network of friends who really take care of you. This is taking a toll on you. Would it be on mental health? We can see that oppressed collectives tend to fall more easily into depression, to commit suicide, to have eating disorders, etc., etc. Or on physical health, because you go to the hospitals and people tend to believe less your voice and your testimonial, for example. So we can see that either women or people of color, when they go to the hospitals, they have to wait more, and they really have to convince the doctor that they feel pain, that it's not just in their heads. So this requires, a level of self-care that is very important. And on the other side, on the side that is more privileged, we can see with the death of George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd, better said, that people start to, white people especially, are starting to educate themselves, right? We can see on Instagram so many books on white fragility from Robin DiAngelo, Me and White Supremacy from Layla Saad, all these books that are now like bestsellers, because the first work for me of this dominant collective is first to understand. Because when you have privilege, usually you don't realize that you have privilege. It's normal for you. So it's a lot of work of educating yourself. It's a work of speaking up. Honestly, we are doing like, and I'm the first to do this, like 150 slides, PowerPoints. The only thing is speaking up. Is the fact that silence is benefiting the oppression. Right? So the oppression is going on and on because, one, people are so terrified to testify and to say what is happening. When they do, they're not believed or nothing is done. And the oppressor has a total impunity and nobody is doing anything about him or her. So the idea is that when this happens more in a movement like Me Too, suddenly people can't deny the reality and say, oh, but you invented it. Oh, but it's your memory of a child. Are you sure? Oh, but no. Then you sum up and you're like, it's not possible that millions of women are hallucinating at the same time. So for the dominant collective is about educating themselves, is about listening. And this means, for once, not talking too much, but listening more to what is happening. And it means speaking up, and especially speaking up to the dominant. So for me, the role of the white men now is to talk to other white men in whatever networks they are, to go and say, hey, actually, there is no people of color in this group. Don't you think we should do something about it? Because since they are at the top of the food chain, they will be more believed and they will have more legitimacy, and then it will not be the work of the oppressed to raise their hand at the risk of being excluded. And to show up.
Thank you so much for sharing this, because my mind is now full with thoughts and questions.
Go for it.
First, I would like to deepen in the concept of privilege, and link it maybe to the Black Lives Matter movement, no? Because I've heard so many times, all lives matter. Is there a link between them two, and could you elaborate?
So All Lives Matter is the response and the answer of the system to Black Lives Matter. Okay, Black Lives Matter comes from the systemic oppression of black people in the US, the fact that they've lived through 250 years of slavery, then 80 years of lynching, then 50 years of civil rights movement. And now in 2020, they're still more racially profiled by the police, more followed, more killed, more imprisoned. So it's a systemic oppression. If you want to look the documentary done by Ava DuVernay, 13th, that is on Netflix, it really shows how this has been planned and organized at political level, at structural level, also because the prison system in the US is a huge economy. And at the end, so many companies are using forced labor coming from the jail, to produce at really low price. So this is a whole, system. So when the black people in the US say, this is not possible, I mean, we can't be killed every day, our lives matter, right? The answer is Black Lives Matter. I mean, really, we matter. And when the response of the dominant group, and in this case, white people, is all lives matter, it's really a way of saying, I'm not hearing your pain. I'm not hearing the problem. Because that is one thing that you do when you have privilege, and we can come back to the definition of privilege. but that you're so unaware of the pain of the people who are not as privileged as you, that you equate their pain and their experience of life with yours. And it's a denial of the reality, right? It's you can't tell people, for example, like Native Americans who have lost their land, who have lost their culture, who have lost their wealth, sometimes their family, etc., that their life has the same value as white lives. Is a spit in the face. It's really, I'm laughing at you and I don't even say it. And that's why people become so angry, because it's this constant denial of the system, of the problem, denial of the responsibility, which is sometimes extremely cynical and drives you mad. Again, literally, right?
Yeah.
So privilege is basically is something you didn't have to work for. So privilege has different levels. First, there is the privilege of you as an individual, and then there are privilege from your social system, let's say. But when you're born with different attributes that don't depend on you, because you're born, you're a baby, you didn't choose anything, right? So the color of your skin, your nationality, your sexual orientation, your gender, as I was saying before, if you identify or not with your sex. Sometimes your religion. In many countries it's given by the parents, right? It's even written on the passport. Your age, of course, your physical ability, your neuro ability. Are you on the spectrum of autism, for example? Do you suffer from any mental illness, etc., etc.? So all these things are, a little like the package with what you're born. Mm-hmm. And here we can't say that we're born with the same package, right? All of us. We have different packages, which is great because it means a lot of diversity. The problem is some are ranked with more value than others, right? Because this is the problem. Not so much that there are different packs, but really the idea that there's different values of the attributes that are in your pack. So it's like opening a gift, right? And then you're like, ooh, you've got the blue stick and you wanted the yellow one or whatever, right? And you're stuck with this, and there's not much you can do to change this. So this idea of privilege goes against the idea that we're all born equal. Because a big denial of the system is to say we are all born equal. It's like we're the same. And this is just a lie. We're not the same. So if you're white, you have a proportion of wealth in your family that is statistically bigger to people who are Latinos, who are Afro-American, who are indigenous, etc., etc. This wealth that has been going on for years and generations, you will inherit from it. Would it be a house? Would it be, even if you don't come from a very rich family, there is still some wealth that is passed on, right? As a white person, it's very rare that you're stopped at the customs when you land at an airport, at a border, that you're followed by the police, that you're profiled by them, that you're stopped by them, asked the idea, stressed about being out without your idea, etc., etc. Basically, you're safe, or at least more safe than other collectives. You can walk around. You don't fear an aggression. You don't fear that the police force might beat you or even kill you. You know that if you apply to a job, the name that you have is not a burden for you. It will not discriminate you. You know that if your face, if it's white skin or the whiter skin it is, will be an asset if you have to, again, go through a border or do a job interview, because you will benefit from what is called the benefit of the doubt. People will consider that you're a good person, right? So by default, we think that people of color are not so good people because they are more in jail, because then they must be criminals somehow. Would it be by genetics or by social cause or whatever? So we're kind of the good guys in the movie, right?
Is there a ladder?
Yes, there is a ladder. Now it's not as, A, B, C, D, E. But yes, at the top, white, male, straight, body-abled, extroverts as well, because they are more valued in the leadership system. Then you have other types of white, I would say. So you have like white men who are not dominant, because a lot of men don't recognize themselves in this, pattern. They're like, no, I'm not like this. I'm actually somebody very sensitive. I'm introvert. I don't like that somebody yells at me. I don't feel comfortable. So, yes. Or men who, for example, are, as I said, introverts, or gay men, or white women, I would say, that are more at the top.
So gay men and white women would be at the same level of privilege?
I mean, I would say, but...
Heterosexual women.
Yeah. I mean, again, no, it's like, it's hard to know exactly, because gay men benefit from the fact that they're men, and women benefit from the fact that they're white, right? So, yeah, I would say it's more or less equivalent, but yeah, according to me, again, it's not like... And below you have, people of color, people with mental illness, people with any physical or mental disability, trans people, etc. And then children who have no rights. This is also something, no? Like UNICEF is fighting a lot for, the rights of children. And for many of us, they are just, they don't have rights yet. The adults can do anything they want with a child, right? And then you have the animals, and then the nature. It's actually what Aristotle called great chain of being. So for him, and at the base of the Greek culture, which is at the base of a lot of the white culture, there is this hierarchy between beings, and it's still very much in us. Especially because, honestly, most of the economic superiority we have today as white people is based on the slavery and the colonialism that we've benefited from. Because we have accumulated so much wealth that now, it's hard for people to reach us again, because there's been like a quantum leap at one point.
And what is the tendency, if you position yourself in 3 years from now? Do you see change coming?
There is hope and there is fear at the same time, right? There is hope because first I see more and more awareness all around the world. People talk about this way more than even 5 years ago. I can see it, I'm French, and I can see it in France, like the type of conversation. Feminism, even if we have Simone de Beauvoir and the second sex, etc., feminism was really a minority in the last 10 years, and now more and more people identify as feminist, and we can see that there are a lot of revendication. So I see a lot of motivation. I see as well that, of course, social media and technology is playing a huge role, because we've all seen the images of George Floyd, right? We've seen the Me Too that happened because of Twitter and because of Facebook, and the fact that suddenly it was everywhere, right? So I see that there is this potential to unite and to fight, because honestly, we are the 99%, right? So it's huge. We say minorities. It's not a minority. It's not.
True.
It's like the women, they're already 52% of the population.
Yeah.
But if you count all the people that are not at the top of the pyramid, it's the majority of the population. So the problem is that we're not united, but I can see more and more movement. So yes, I have hope. On the contrary, when the system is questioned, it answers with even more force and backlash, and that's what is happening now, right? It's like it denies the reality. It imprisons people like in Taiwan or in Hong Kong or in Chile so imprison people, threaten them, sometimes even kill them, and we see a rise of evangelists, of white supremacists who are really triggered and worried about the rise of women, people of color, or different people, basically challenging their supremacy that has been there for many, many years now. So I don't know what to say. On the one hand, I am hopeful because I see changes coming, but I know the system will not give up the power without a fight. And sometimes that's very scary, because we are now at an age where we have an amazing quantity of weapons, So I'm an optimistic. I want to believe we're making a positive change, but we have to be on the lookout all the time. We have to be aware that our rights, our current rights, are never a given, that it can be taken away like this. And we saw it during the COVID. Like in 2 days, suddenly we are all locked in our rooms without a right to say anything.
Yeah.
And was it good or not good? I mean, this is not a question, but what I mean is in 2 days, half the world can be in lockdown. This says a lot about the capacity of oppression of the system.
So I would like to finish with the question of what would you recommend to us, the minority, to be better organized?
First is realize your power, because during all your life you've been told that you're worth nothing, that you can't challenge the system, you're a little grain of salt. So actually we can do so much. I mean, we've seen Greta Thunberg being very young and still having a big mediatic impact. So I do believe that we do have a lot of power, and there are many tactics that we can use. There is a very good book, From Dictatorship to Democracy, from Gene Sharp, explaining how different revolutionary movements have organized in non-violent way to topple dictatorship. So we have a huge power. Now it means organization. It means really knowing your own history, using as much the media or creating alternative media so that we can display what is going on. But I also think that beyond this, the idea is that we have zero tolerance from now on. No, it's like when your grandfather is making a joke at the dinner table, tell him. When a colleague is making a remark to another colleague, say something. When, you see a brand that is not advertising the way you would like, send a Twitter to that brand and don't buy this brand anymore. I mean, I think that there are also some of very small action that we can do to make a change, So it's this sum of very, very small changes. And after, your question to answer is, do you want to change the system from within, or do you want to create alternative systems? And this is the question of each one of us to answer, right? The two are valid. One will require a lot of patience and a lot of abnegation, I would say. The other will be hard as well, to unite people and to have financial means to do this. But I see these are the two ways, no? And sometimes we forget we can create alternative systems. We tend to change the old, but why not create the new, right? And create systems that actually work according to the rules you believe in and you believe are more just.
Super. Thank you so much, Aurélie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is Proyecto Co, a channel of collaboration and co-creation for social good.